Hey, I'm Matt at the Small Town Craftsman. Today I'm going to show you how to make this rustic style coffee table. Modern farmhouse coffee table. Farmhouse style coffee table. Rustic modern coffee table. Rustic modern farmhouse style X-brace farmhouse. You get the idea. It's a coffee table. You see what it looks like. I started off this build by cutting all the base pieces to rough length on the miter saw. And my miter saw doesn't quite get square for some reason, so cutting them just to rough size, and then I'm going to bring them over to my crosscut sled, cut off the factory edge, and then cut them to their final size. I decided to cut them all to their final length as one big piece, just to make sure that everything is nice and accurate. And if you don't want to do it this way, you could also do it with a stop block like I have set up right here. And after everything was cut to size, I went ahead and started sanding everything just because it's going to be way easier to get a nice smooth finish before these things are put together, because it's going to get into some pretty tight angles. To keep this build DIY friendly, for the construction of the frame, I decided to use just good old glue and screws. So for the bottom, gonna use a 2x4 just as a spacer to give that leg support a little bit of elevation. I just pre-drilled 2 holes, ran some screws through, and these will later be filled with a plug, and the base is actually going to get painted, so you'll never even know that these were here. And the same thing for the top. After you check for square, just no space at the top. So rinse and repeat. So just ran into a little bit of a hiccup. No, not a big deal, but I'm going to show you a little thing that you can do that might help if you ever run into this. So my top board here wasn't quite flush when I screwed it in. So I backed the screw out, and to hold it up, it's already screwed everywhere. I couldn't just hold it and then screw it back in place. So most clamps can actually become spreaders. So for this one, I just take this off, put it in the back, and then from there, and then drill a hole again. Put a screw. There you go. It's fixed. When it comes to putting glue on the end of a board, really use a lot of glue, and the excess, just find somewhere else for that. After the frame was assembled for the base, I started working on the X braces, and you can do these a few different ways. You could actually do math, but nobody wants to do that. So I like to put the pieces in place, clamp them where they're going to be, and then just mark it with a pencil to get a good line. And from there you can get the angle needed and actually take that over to the saw and just go ahead and cut it. However, for these specific dimensions, I ended up having an odd angle. And if this angle exceeds the capabilities of your miter saw, I find it easiest to actually use the table saw to cut these out. So a little bit different way of doing it, but here's how I did it. So getting that reading off of the speed square, what I saw is I needed a 60-degree angle, and some miter saws actually will go to 60 degrees, chop, and you're good to go. Unfortunately, mine doesn't do that, so have to come up with another way. You could cut it by hand with a circular saw or a jigsaw or even a hand saw. I want the most repeatable and fastest way, and I've already had this jig made up from another project when I built one of these before, but just a different way to get greater angles than you traditionally would use. You can set up a vertical jig where you actually run the workpiece through it on its end, and the way that works is the angle needed 60 degrees. If you think of the table saw blade and you just tilt it, it only goes to 45. So to get to 60, if you turn the workpiece on its end and tilt the blade to 30, because 90 minus 30 is 60, that's the angle we need, and run it through that way, you can actually get your desired angle. And so I've already ran this through once on the test piece, and it matches up exactly how I had it marked from the leg itself. And so now I'll go through and show you how to cut it. Hope it works. If you do end up going this route and have to cut your piece vertically, there are a few things to consider. And the first is just make sure the piece is securely in place. And the easiest way to do this is to use clamps to hold it there. The second is to use a scrap piece of wood behind your workpiece so that when the blade passes through, you reduce the tear out and it will give you a much cleaner cut. And the last thing is make sure that your piece is at its final length before you cut it. Here you're just essentially cutting the angle, and if you have to make it shorter, it's going to be a lot harder to run that piece through because you're not going to have a flat reference point. All my pieces are cut to size on the table saw, and when I did it on the table saw, you notice I was cutting a thicker board. It was the same thickness as the frame, but it just looked a little too beefy for the size of this frame. So what I did is I just cut them all in half. So now it'll fit right in the center of this frame. And by doing that, it also allowed me to make my cuts a little bit easier. So you could, here we go, have two, just like that. Or what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take this and cut it here so that these fit in the same center line. So everything here is in clamps, and you can see that using those offcuts really come in handy to make up for that angle so you have a square clamping surface. So use those on all the corners. And in the middle here, I did the same thing, using those offcuts just to pinch. And so I'll let that set up for a little bit and take it out. So now that the legs are assembled, I'm gonna install the aprons or the stretchers or whatever you wanna call them. I'm just gonna use 2 pocket holes on each side. I did start by clamping these at 90 degrees just to make sure that was good. And then I clamped it all the way across. With pocket holes, you definitely want to use clamps because as soon as you get one in, it can tend to twist the piece. Don't ask me how I know. But I'm going to drive these in on all 4 sides, and then we'll be one step closer. If you like what you've seen so far, do me a favor. Like the video, comment down below, maybe even subscribe. And then if you want to know when I come out with new awesome videos like this, hit the notification bell and you will be alerted every time I come out with a sweet new video. Once that was attached, I just went over all of the sharp edges and hand sanded those just to make those a little softer to the touch and got it ready for paint. The base is going to be painted white, but the bottom, which I'm cutting the slats out for here, is actually going to take a stain that's going to be the same color as the top. And this is going to be made out of white ash versus the base, which is made out of pine. So I'm just cutting these to length. I'm going to use pocket holes here, and just to make sure that I have a better connection, I put the 2 side by side and drill 2 pocket holes on each. After that, started cutting out all the slats for the bottom shelf and just picked an arbitrary width that just kind of looked good. And once those were cut, I gave everything a 1/8 inch round over just to soften that touch up a little bit, and then started working on the top. So for the top of this coffee table, I'm going to be using white ash. So you could really use anything. I'm using a hardwood versus a softwood just because this is what's going to get the most wear and tear. So I want something really durable. It's going to get stained, so I went with ash because it's going to take the color well. The grain is going to look similar to the pine that the legs are, even though that those are going to be painted. And I don't want to use an overly expensive hardwood since it is going to get stained anyway. So what I've done is, at this point, the boards are the thickness that they're going to be for the top. And I've just laid everything out here. This is much bigger than what the top is actually going to be. But I've laid everything out just to get a look at my grain patterns to kind of mix and match and see where I want to put everything. So after I picked out all my boards, I decided I was going to cut them all to the same width. And it is going to be one big panel, so it's not completely necessary, but I think since all the grain patterns are a little bit different, if that is at least consistent across the width of the tabletop, I think it's a detail that's just going to make it look that much better. but definitely not necessary. So if you notice, I cut everything to 4 and 15/16, and the final width of this tabletop is going to be 34 inches. So if you do some quick math, that'll come out to about 34.5 inches. And that's okay, because once I get these boards in the panel, or about to glue them up, I'm gonna joint them on the meeting edges, and between all of the boards, that'll make up for that 1/2 inch. And if it doesn't, then I can just trim off a little off of each side, or one side, depending on how much or little that is, and it's gonna be just fine, and you'll never notice. So, like I said, not necessary, but I think it's a little detail that's gonna make it look that much better and help me sleep at night. So, to each their own. Anytime you're gluing multiple boards together on the edge grain, in an effort to keep them from cupping in the future, if you do the smile frown method like you saw on the end grain of those boards, that is just going to help keep them in line for years to come, so they last even longer. So once I got this first panel in the clamps, I got the second panel in the clamps, got those both gluing up, and once those were both dry, I put those together, and that's what you see here. This is the table close to its final size, but not quite. So let that sit for a little while, and then after that was ready, I marked everything out and cut it to its final width. The top also got the same 1/8 inch round over that the bottom slats did. So I did this on the top and the bottom, and also on the sides. And here's a nice little slow-mo for effect. So this coffee table is actually a commission build, and I'm matching something that the customer already has in their home, and that's where this dark color comes from. So this is called Kona. Pretty dark stain on things like pine, but on this white ash, it's a little bit more subtle. So really happy with this color. Probably something that I'll use again in the future, but gave that a wipe, let that sit, and in the meantime, I started putting on primer. So I laid down 2 coats of a high hiding primer, and you really want to make sure that you do this with woods like pine, because the tannins from the knots can soak through, especially a white color, and then it just kind of looks bad and it's hard to fix, or it just is more to do to fix the issue. So put down 2 coats of primer, and after the primer was done and the top coat was done, I started working on the bottom slats. So before I started actually nailing any of these into place, I went through and did some math against my will to make sure that my spacing was going to be consistent between each one. And then I cut a spacer piece to just hold in place to make sure everything stayed lined up. So using a combo square, I just made sure that the depth off of each stretcher was the same, clamp it in place, and then from the underside, I put in 2 brad nails. And you could have easily done this from the top. It would have been much faster and a lot easier, but I didn't want to see those little nail holes, even though it would have been subtle. You know, something that just takes a little bit longer, but in the end, I think it actually looks a lot better. So that's what I did. So after all of these slats were installed, I started working on some recessed leveling feet, and these might not be necessary, but since this is going to someone else's home, I'd rather be safe than sorry, because I know my floors aren't level, so I'm not banking on everyone else's floors being level. Once those were in, I finished the top and the bottom slats with 4 coats of a water-based matte polyurethane, and that was it. Thanks for sticking around and watching the video. If you want to see more, follow me on Instagram at The Small Town Craftsman, where I post more frequently than I do here on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, give me a like, and share with someone who you think might benefit from this. Hopefully you learned something, and if not, we're at least entertained. But this is something that I'm just trying to share my woodworking journey with the world out there. I'm still learning things as I go. I'm by no means perfect. So if you would have done anything different, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe I can learn something from you. So if you haven't already, subscribe, and until next time, happy building.